friends. Good morning. Welcome to the launch of our policy paper, Europe's New Security Architecture. And Mr. Commissioner, thank you so much for coming. Only a year ago, when the narrative of Ukraine was that Ukraine was a heroic nation, fighting to be helped, but already at that time we in Martens Center underlined that what has been missing is the fact that Ukraine is crucial for Europe's security and defense. To be honest, at that time we didn't so much speak about drones, but more about normal capabilities, manpower, and so forth. Fast forward. In one of our internal meetings, Commissioner Kubilius made the comparison of importance of Ukraine to United States, and at that moment we decided that that's it. We need to have a more concrete plan, and luckily we had in our ranks our academic council member Aljona Livko, who was in her previous, well, first of all, decorated Ukrainian politician who was running our partner organization in London, Henry Jackson Society. Currently is a lecturer and in Department of War in King's College, and also running very successful own company, St. James Foreign Policy Group. So thank you for all coming. So how we are going to play this, I will give Madame Livko floor to kind of propose the main or present the main proposals of the paper. After that, I will give floor to Commissioner Kubilius for the keynote speech, and after that we have a panel. So, Madame Livko, floor is yours.
Thank you, Tommy. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning. A special thanks to Commissioner Kubilius, who's not just here, but also contributed to this paper by allowing me to interview him. As Tommy mentioned, Ukraine is increasingly becoming a very important security actor on the European continent. Since 2014 and later on especially 2022 of the full-scale invasion, Ukraine has turned from and transformed from the state that was barely capable of defending itself into one of the most innovative and powerful military powers on the continent, if not in the world today. And we can see it even from some of the examples of current warfares and conflicts. Based on its own lack of military capabilities from 2014 and 2022, and the lack of Western support from the start of the first and following into second invasion, Ukraine had to develop its innovative defense technological sector. And based on that, it deployed ingenuity, and it resulted in the modern capabilities that we're all facing today, which we can discuss later on. Another factor was, of course, the fact that Russia waged a multi-domain hybrid warfare on Ukraine. And that resulted into Ukraine developing absolutely new tools and ways to address those. As we've seen, Europe has also been on the receiving side of similar attacks. It's not just the targeting of critical infrastructure or meddling with elections or conduct of cognitive warfare on European soil. We have seen heightened espionage on the European soil, assassination attacks, arson, and all of that contributes modern warfare on the European soil. So based on that, Ukraine's experience, its innovation and capabilities can directly translate into the new European security architecture. Europe has been recipient of quite a robust security umbrella from the United States, but increasingly with the uncertainty of transatlantic relationship, it's important that Europe build up its own security architecture. And I think the best contributor to that new security architecture and a foundation with its military innovation its conduct of war, the development of effectively a new military doctrine of how to fight contemporary warfares, Ukraine could serve as a strong foundation for the new European security architecture. Based on that, in this paper, I produced several policy recommendations. They divide into defense industry integration of Ukraine as well as political and institutional integration. Starting with the defense industry, Ukraine could first participate in European Defense Fund projects and participate in European Defense Industry Program. It could launch joint procurement processes, and we've already seen some successful examples of joint ventures on the European source between Ukrainian defense startups and European defense startups that are practicing and innovating new technology and deploying it in Ukraine where it's being tested, and then the lessons learned go straight back to Europe. Utilizing administrative arrangements mechanism with the European Defence Agency, participating in the European Defence Fund, and stronger participation in ReArm Europe could all contribute to Ukraine's security, supporting its defense industry while exporting all the knowledge, expertise, and know-how into European countries. On the political level, of course, Ukraine is well on the way with its accession into the European Union. The Cluster 6 of its accession, external relations, is almost fully implemented. But there are some steps where Ukraine could be implemented even further, and I think those ideas are being voiced in Brussels even more and more, and that constitutes associate membership or observer status in such bodies as Political Security Committee, European External Action Service, presence, EU Military Committee. There are some ideas about incorporating Ukraine into EU Satellite Center based on its strong defense and space expertise, which we can talk more about later in this meeting. But the most important ideas and innovations that this paper offers is the creation of new frameworks and new bodies where Ukraine can contribute. I think the first one, of course, is the European Defence Force, which is much talked about. Ukraine currently fields about 800,000 active combat troops. And while they are being deployed and redeployed on European soil, the veterans that Ukraine will have after any ceasefire is reached is not something that, of course, that will be easy for Ukraine to absorb. Many of those people will still have made a political military career out of their service, and they could constitute a very active combat experience force on the European soil and serve as a foundation along with other EU, NATO member forces on the European soil. So that's one idea that this paper proposes. The second one is intelligence sharing community, that European states and European leg of NATO could create something akin to the Five Eyes community that already exists with Western nations. Ukraine has exceptional experience in recognizing Russian operations, sabotage, and espionage tactics. It has experience in allocating and addressing those instances, and just intelligence sharing, knowledge exchange with European states could serve as a strong foundation for this initiative. In increasingly challenging security environment in Europe, especially with advancement of hybrid warfare, such intelligence sharing community will be essential to the security of all European states. And lastly, the idea is not new, but it does need expansion, which was also developed by the Martin Center and Ionela here, is the European Security Council and Ukraine's associate membership before it becomes a full EU member in the European Security Council. It goes deeper into describing exactly which capabilities Ukraine can contribute to this community of states, along with other democracies like the UK, Norway, Canada, potentially Japan and South Korea, extending geography in the era of hybrid warfare when wars are not only limited to geography, but they span various domains. So we can dive deeper into how exactly that partnership could look like before Ukraine's accession and go into more detail on anything that Ukraine can contribute, but I think I will pause it here for now.
Thank you, Aliona. Many proposals, and now response and reaction. Commissioner Kubilius, floor is yours.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot very much. And dear Aliona, you did a great job. Really very interesting to read and to listen. And I will try to share some comments on very important topic, European security architecture, and Ukraine, and why it is so much connected, and why we need to talk about European security architecture, something new. So I will start from very simple, facts of truth. First of all, definitely in Europe we are living through very different times than it was back, several years ago. We have really clear understanding of threats, Russian threats, continuation of the war in Ukraine, and possibility of Russian aggression against EU and NATO member states. What our intelligence services are predicting. Then the war in Iran and really the issues related with the supply of weapons to Europe and to Ukraine. Those issues can come very soon. And the last point is really very loudly or quite clearly announced American plans to start to withdraw the resources from Europe, shifting them to other regions like Indo-Pacific or the Western Hemisphere. So this is in general, nothing new about where we are. Now, second, what again we can just agree with some recent big statements. For example, Marco Rubio, who said that Ukraine has the strongest army in Europe. That was repeated by Alex Stubb. He said even that the Ukrainian army may be the best in the world. I don't know if Americans will agree, but that was a good statement. And that is what would speak to us if we have on the European continent the strongest European army next in our neighborhood. It should speak very clearly that integration of Ukrainian, defense capabilities, integration of those capabilities with European defense should be the strongest vital interest of Europe. That's one thing. Now, Ukraine has the strongest army, not only because they have the bravest soldiers and the smartest generals, but also because Ukraine has the strongest innovative defense industry. And so Europe should have the strongest vital interest to integrate that innovative defense industry with European defense industry. From another side, so that was about Ukraine. From another side, we need to look into our own situation. We have fragmented European defense policy and defense industry. That is our historical legacy. We have 27 defense policies, 27 defense budgets, and 27 national armies, and 27 national vetoes. And we can ask only ourselves, would Americans become stronger if they would have, instead of one federal army, 50 armies on the state levels, 50 budgets, defense budgets, and 50 defense policies, and 50 vetoes, so perhaps not. So that's why we need to understand that if we want really to become stronger, that is our wish on looking into all those challenges, we need to become more united, not more fragmented. So that is what is, in my view, one of the key prerogatives, and it's really the most difficult to overcome because politically and psychologically this is a historical legacy. According to the treaties, defense for member states is a national prerogative, and EU is till now is playing very limited role. So I would remind also that recently Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Ambassadors Conference and German Foreign Affairs Minister Vodapol in Adenauer Conference raised very, very important question, which has in itself the answer, but the question was, are the doctrines, institutions and decision-making in foreign policy, but also in security policy, in defense policy, are they fit for today's challenges or not? Well, they gave no proper answer, but the question raised in such a way was giving the answer. That really we need to understand that we have the issue if do our institutions and our defense architecture at the moment, do they fit to all the challenges which we are facing? And we have really looking what is my responsibility directly, defense industry, we have big defense industrial challenges at the moment for European Union. Despite all the financial resources which we are bringing into defense industry of Europe, Russia still quite heavily outproduces European Union in all the different areas of defense production. American withdrawal demands effective replacement of strategic enablers, big items. German experts just recently calculated that it will cost around 500 billion euros for Europeans to build those strategic enablers and to replace American strategic enablers now located on the European continent. And in addition to that, the last point, we do not have a single defense market on the European continent. And here you can remember Draghi report about fragmentation of defense industry, which does not allow defense production to scale up as we would like to see. So that's what allows me to say that we need big change of our policies and practices in defense. Now, so I spoke lately about broader issues, what we are facing in Europe, but in my view, mainly Ukraine issue is the issue why we need urgently to talk about new European security architecture, because we cannot integrate Ukrainian defense capabilities, the best in Europe, into the old structures. That's my very simple, conclusion. NATO membership for Ukraine is not agreed at the moment, and we do not see when it can be agreed. Membership in EU can take longer time. I would be very happy to see Ukraine, tomorrow member of European Union, but we need to see a reality. It can take longer time, and Europe needs to become much stronger, not at some time in the future, but now. So if Putin, we need to understand, if Putin will start aggression against EU or NATO country, now we shall face battle-tested Russian army with capability to use millions of drones. We have no such experience among EU or NATO member states, at least those who are on the front line or here in the European continent. Only Ukraine has such an experience. This is very clear condition why we need European defense architecture with possibility for Ukraine to integrate institutionally now, not tomorrow. That is why we need what we call European Defense Union. It's not very different what you have said about Security Council, but yeah, it's institutional a little bit differently. We see, what does it mean European Security Council and what does it mean European Defense Union, but I understand that in your understanding, perhaps what you speak about European Security Council, we speak about European Defense Union, but the essence is very similar. So in my view, Ukraine, but also United Kingdom, Norway, maybe Turkey, maybe even Canada, would be able to join European Union member states in this established European Defense Union. European Defense Union should be established voluntarily among the member states, among the countries, which wants much stronger cooperation in defense, much more of unity in defense, which now is not available. European Defence Union, from legal or constitutional point of view, can be created in different ways, perhaps. I am always trying, for time being, to avoid very technicalities of legal thought, how it can be created. I am much more focused on the content, what that union should bring. But in my view, the most effective way it would be to look into possibility of new intergovernmental treaty. Because all other attempts to find in EU treaties some kind of enhanced cooperation articles and so on, first of all, would leave some countries which are not members of EU in some kind of unknown territory. So what we should do with them, how we should include them into European Defence Union. And second, in my view, looking again into, from historical point of view, European Union articles about defense, security and foreign policy are devoted mostly for activities of European Union outside of European Union territory. Not for, for external activities, operations and so on, but not for territorial defense of European countries. So that is, in short, how I see the next, stages. I can repeat very briefly why we need European Defence Union, not only for Ukraine, despite the fact that I said mainly for Ukraine, but we can see a lot of benefits also for internal developments of European continent in defense. So in my view, first of all, European Defence Union could be very strong platform for more of unity, for more effective decision-making, and for collective leadership. So that is why, in my view, European Defence Union can be effective instrumentally to create a leadership body, European Security Council. That's our difference, because in my view, Security Council could be a smaller arrangement among big member states, which has power military, but also several rotational member states and then institutions, in order really to have an effective platform, as Macron and Merkel were saying 10 years ago, effective platform to discuss big issues and to find big answers to big issues. And then we can have, the whole coalition of willing countries. Now we should call them members of European Defence Union, but that could be really exactly such an arrangement. Why we need such kind of leadership like European Security Council? In my view, first of all, for balanced top-down approach in developing of most important pan-European defense projects, what we call now EDPCIs, or the same strategic enablers. Why I have said, the strategic enablers, according to evaluation of German experts, will cost us 500 billion euros. So it's quite a big amount of money. It's absolutely clear that we shall not be able to finance from next MFF, but we can finance from attempt to have partly, it's wrong maybe what, collectivization of, it sounds a little bit Soviet, but at least, to agree among the member states that they will spend some part of their national defense money, which will be till, we need to remember, till 2035, if member states will increase their defense spending up to 3.5%, it will be around of 7 trillion euros which member states will spend. So really it covers those 500 billion, but we need to find a way how to partly use those money in a collective way. And also we need leadership, some kind of this leadership in the way of European Security Council, to agree among ourselves how we shall replace not only strategic enablers of American origin, but also how we replace what we can call American Rapid Reaction Force in Europe, which is now played by American troops, around of 100,000. So in order, again, to agree on European Rapid Reaction Force, how to create it, we need some kind of this leadership. European Defence Union, in my view, should be built around principle of 42.7 article of Treaty of European Union on mutual assistance. And here I would turn your attention to Chancellor Merz, who back in Munich spoke about Article 42.7 as the basis for European pillar of NATO, which is, according to him, separable but not separate. And also he spoke about Article 42.7 in his proposal how Ukraine should be going through integration towards EU. So this is really what I see very good connection of what we are trying to speak out and what Chancellor was speaking in some way in the same direction. European Defence Union will be inside of NATO in the same way as European Union is. You know, with some members maybe not being members of NATO, but as organization, it should be in a very strong cooperation, first of all, with NATO. Also, of course, with the EU, I think that here could be possibilities to find a way how European Union institutions would be in an effective way used for the benefit of European Defence Union. Ukrainian membership in European Defence Union, in my view, would be the major stepstone towards full membership in European Union. And with this, you know, integration into European Defence Union, we really can create among Europeans, first of all, the clear understanding of vital interest of Europe to have Ukraine inside of Europe. Still, I am afraid that for time being, there is some kind of shortage of that understanding of vital interest. Usually when Europeans are talking about Ukrainian membership, we are talking about, well, we are good people in Europe, maybe we shall give, you know, Ukraine this nice gift of, you know, membership in EU, which is a wrong approach. Ukraine membership in EU is our vital interest. It's the interest of Ukraine, but it's our vital interest also. So, what is needed for progressing to that, going into this direction? Well, first of all, definitely peace in Ukraine. And in my view, we need to have a plan how Ukraine will prevail, which Ukraine now is doing, but maybe even, you know, more defined plan for prevail of Ukraine would be very much needed in order really to push Putin for peace. This is the only way how Putin can be pushed for just peace, and then we need to be ready to finance such a plan. So we need to shift from our assistance logic, when we are talking always that we shall stand with Ukraine as long as it takes, into a little bit different logic. We shall support Ukraine in order for Ukraine to prevail. And that is the way how peace will be achieved. Then we need, perhaps at the very beginning, much more intensive work of informal European Security Council. In at least we see that format E5, you know, E5 plus, which is now doing not a bad job, but perhaps it would be very good if that such kind of informal gathering would start to look much more precisely into how this European security architecture in the form of European Defence Union should be developed, so to discuss some kind of roadmap towards European Defence Union and Ukraine in the European Defence Union, and to coordinate the process. And then the whole roadmap, in my view, could be very simple. First of all, informal European Security Council, then creation through intergovernmental treaty of European Defence Union, at first among those who want to have that European Defence Union. We can have some kind of threshold, how many countries need to be signing and the treaty. 15 member states maybe would be enough. And for establishment of European Defence Union, then others maybe will follow later on. And then Ukrainian membership in European Defence Union, and also creation of formal European Security Council inside of established European Defence Union. And then, you know, all other things which we need very soon to develop, like key enablers, 500 billion euros for that, rapid reaction force, and so on and so on. And my question is, you know, how Ukraine would look into that possibility. That is very much important point. I would be really very positive if Ukraine would take that as an important step forward and in some way would take big part of the leadership in developing of this, new European security architecture. And just finalizing, this is another topic, but in my view, we Europeans still, well, as I said, we need to understand the vital interest of us, of Europeans, to have Ukraine in our, security architecture, in order, first of all, to use Ukrainian defense capabilities to strengthen our own defense capabilities. Of course, on the way to help Ukraine to achieve peace and then to strengthen also to strengthen Ukrainian defense. But we are still not looking into a broader picture, which in my view is still missing for us to understand the whole importance, both of European security, new security architecture with Ukraine inside, because we need to see long-term impact of that development on eastern part of European continent, including Russia. And in my view, sustainable peace in Europe can come through success of Ukraine and inspirational power of that success on possible developments in Russia. With, Russia coming back to normality, definitely there are two questions. When? After Putin? And what does it mean, normality? But this is how we can go into next stage of our discussion. Thanks a lot.
All right. Good. Okay. Definitely two interventions, two speeches, a lot of food for thought. So now we go to the panel discussion. And I give, actually, my first question is Mr. Klaus Welle. Mr. Klaus Welle's introduction often in Brussels is that no need for introduction, right? But I do it anyway. So, former Secretary General of the European People's Party, former Secretary General of the group of the European People's Party in the European Parliament, and Secretary General of the former Secretary General of the European Parliament. But here, as a role in the role of chair of the academic council of Martens Center. So what? So, Mr. Welle, Mr. Welle Klaus,
yeah.
I would, first question. Let's play it in the way I make kind of macro-political questions, 1, 2, 3, and then I give floor to you, and so you have the full responsibility of making this a great event. But to the question to Mr. Welle Klaus, if one would be a little bit the devil's advocate, one could ask that does this make sense? In the sense that you could make an argument that, okay, we have had this dependency on United States, and now we are putting our eggs on Ukraine, as everybody has stated so many times, that which is a real, military force. But many insecurities on the future of Ukraine, remain. What would you say for that claim? What is there a risk in that dependency? How should we play it as a Europe, and why?
Look, I think we have to objectively see the situation we are in first. And this is that the United States has re-evaluated its own interests globally in security. And they've come to the conclusion that defense of Europe is number 4. Number 1 is Western Hemisphere. Number 2 is Asia Pacific. Number 3 is the Middle East. Number 4 is Europe. And this is not just paper. We see it very precisely because they are, for the moment, they have been using up the ammunition on Iran, which would have been vital for Ukraine's defense. So these choices have consequences. We also see that they are not leaving NATO, but reinterpreting what Article 5 would mean for the United States in case of a military conflict. because Article 5 is very vague. Member state can decide whatever it would provide. So it's clear they're always using the same sentence. First priority for conventional defense is for Europe, secondary responsibility for the United States. So first responsibility for Europe, secondary responsibility for the United States. That doesn't fit very well with the traditional picture, where we would have expected 100,000 American troops within 10 days, for example, to be in the Baltics or wherever this might be. We also learned, I think, last week from newspaper articles that they told that in case of a military conflict, there would be between 50% or 2/3 less aircraft fighters, submarines, frigates, and so on. So we are not speaking paper here. We are not speaking something abstract. We see that the American strategy is being implemented. What we have to hope for, and I hope what is the outcome of the NATO summit, is that this is an orderly process where we can build up in the same time that other resources will not be available. For this, probably we would need 10 years, 10 years of NATO planning until 2034. But we don't know whether we have it. So there is a risk of a gap, of a weakness. And the only one, from my point of view, who could fill this is Ukraine. Because Ukraine has 800,000 soldiers, battle-tested army, millions of drones production, lot of production capability. I was 3 weeks ago in Kiev, and the figure was given, I don't know whether it's correct. At the beginning of the war, production capacity in the defense area, 1 billion. Now, 55 billion. So that means Ukraine, if there should be a ceasefire, will be in an absolutely vital role. And we don't have an interest that Ukraine is reducing its capacities. We have an interest that these capacities are being made of good use, because we need them. So Ukraine can exactly fill the gap in this very difficult transition process. But it also means we cannot only expect from Ukraine, we also have to give to Ukraine. Ukraine will become a net security provider. Very important that we change our mindset, because now we always think it's kind of, I don't know, help, support, benevolence on our side. Yes, it was, but Ukraine is objectively becoming a net security provider. And therefore that net security provider, which is critical, has to be bound into our structures. And that's the importance of the membership debate, also of the proposal of Friedrich Merz. By the way, I wouldn't have called it associate membership. I would call it progressive membership, to make clear that this is a dynamic process where we take it as quickly and but also as thoroughly as we can to a new status. So, in my understanding, Ukraine is becoming the first pillar of European defense. Not the sixth pillar, not the third pillar, the first pillar, because if Ukraine prevails, we will be safe. If Ukraine is connected closely into the European Union, we are safe. So this is becoming a very strategic relationship for us, as it has also been explained by the Commissioner.
Thank you, Klaus. I will next go to Commissioner Kubilius and then Aliona. Basically, more or less the same question. It's what Klaus said about the change of mindset and maybe the political context. So, Mr. Commissioner, like two parts. Do you, like politically, what I got a little bit from your speech, that is there now feeling that Ukraine is, a little bit, if you look at the discussion, that Ukraine is taken for granted? that the fact that Ukraine will be in our side is that not enough has been effort has been made. Also taking into account Ukraine's future and post-war situation, which we can assume will be very, very quickly very different. And then also what you said about, you made reference in your speech about 42.7 and Merz proposal, and so how would that work if you would have this, at the same time you had this progressive membership, and as we know, as you mentioned, 42.7 is now being used, the common defense clauses, as a kind of legal basis to build up the European defense architecture. So how do you see?
Well, there are definitely quite a lot of questions which we need, or issues which we need to take into account. First, really, this progressive membership, as Klaus have said, is something what was discussed for quite a time. Even back in the European Parliament, I was proposing something like that. It was Romano Prodi formula, everything but institutions. I mean that, really opening of special, integration, for example, into single market, into some other areas, is very, very much possible, and that would be, in my view, beneficial. But most beneficial, and both for Ukraine and for us, would be integration into European security architecture, a specific pillar, which we need to build, quite quickly. And in my view, that European defense pillar, looking, from European point of view, is better to create outside of existing European treaty with special treaty. So that's a little bit of exercise which we need to do. So, and again, definitely that would be, as I said, beneficial for Ukraine, beneficial for us, first of all, from very clear, material defense, point of view, but also from very much from psychological point of view, because we need to remember that full integration into Ukraine into EU will require in some countries, referendums and so on, support of the people of that, of that integration. And as always, we hear some specific groups, I will not go into that direction, but farmers somewhere in Europe are complaining, well, if Ukraine will be, will become member of EU, farmers in France or somewhere else will suffer, some other business also will suffer, and so on, which is maybe natural reaction, but it shows that there is lack of this, what I call, understanding of the vital interest on our side to have Ukraine integrated. So to create that psychological perception that Ukraine is vital is exactly the best way is to have Ukraine and us together on, the platform to defend Europe. So that's my point, that this is, this is what we need to do. Now, but of course there are, there are also some kind of challenges which we shall face, and those challenges are again related with our historical legacy. In Europe, defense always was a matter of national member states. NATO was coordinating, but this is not for national member states. And still I feel quite a big deficit among member states of understanding that we need to start to look into, European defense capability, not national, but European. What I'm trying to say in a very simple way, such countries like Baltic states and others, in Europe, perhaps all of us, we are not big enough to seriously to take care about our, defense without collective defense capability. So collective defense is really the must for European nations to be safe. But we need to see that, till now we had this transatlantic collective defense of Europe, and now it starts to shift from transatlantic into European collective defense of Europe. And member states need to start to look into how to create this European, security architecture inside of NATO, but different, But, I see that problem that member states are so, how to say, traditionally, so much engaged into national defense development that for them still it's quite difficult to start to see this European panorama. And that is what we shall need to find the ways how to change it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Aliona, bit the same question. Do you have a sense? Actually, two parts. Do you have a sensation that we in EU are taking Ukraine for granted? That automatically Ukraine will be there for us? That we don't realize the kind of what could happen socially in Ukraine? And secondly, if you allow me, because now the discussion is, there's a narrative that maybe this year there will be some kind of ceasefire. And there's a narrative, well, the question, what will Russia do? Will they try to domestically sort out the situation, or shall they double down? And so in the scenario, what, according to the proposals, what you have in your paper would only work with the assumption that Ukraine, having ceasefire, would then continue to join the ranks and fight for, actually had a leading role in fighting against Russia, to put it very bluntly. If you allow me to say, for example, if I understood, your brother has been in front lines now for 4 years and not in the easiest spot. So how do you see the Ukrainian society in that? Would they re-engage for the new war, to put it very bluntly?
Thank you, Tommy. First of all, I think on the democracy and Ukraine being taken for granted by the European Union, I don't think there's a sentiment like that in Ukraine at all. In fact, being part of the young generation who was in politics as an activist since the age of 17, when the first Orange Revolution of 2004 broke out, we were there on the squares of our cities and towns, aspiring to be more European, to implement the values that we saw just across the border into Ukrainian systems, into our lives. In 2014, 10 years later, at the Revolution of Dignity, I was also there already witnessing people dying on the main square of Kyiv, fighting for that right, fighting for the EU association agreement. So I think the young generation of Ukraine is very much oriented towards becoming part of the EU. And now, especially when the EU has taken such a strong lead in supporting Ukraine after the Americans took a step back, I think there's a great deal of appreciation. Ukraine is very conscious and sees all the problems that all the European nations are facing internally, domestically, and especially now with the Iran war, with energy and the lack and shortage and potential recessions that some countries are facing. All of that is being very well comprehended in Ukraine, and I think the appreciation only grows. There are some levels of frustration, of course, with the speed of supplies of certain weapons or financial aid. Perhaps Ukrainians would expect, just based on knowing Russia, more robust sanctions against the aggressor, just knowing that deterrence is always stronger and better than then fighting the war. So it's also translating its own experience into its expectations from the EU, I would say. But Ukraine is also now shifting, as Klaus rightly mentioned. It's moved from being a recipient of aid to a security provider, to a main innovator in the world. I would be as blunt as to say that, because having interviewed some of the tech companies from the US who operate in Ukraine for this paper, they did all say that, Ukraine is modern laboratory of warfare, and that's why they're there, and that's where they're enhancing their capabilities to then implement them into American defense sector, which, as we know, is the strongest in the world now. But they're learning in Ukraine. So while Ukraine is on the rise effectively from having become a developing democracy, a post-Soviet state with very weak institutions, having moved into a middle power status, as some of the experts would call it now, why Europe would not, after having invested so much, why would it not just bring all of its expertise and sometimes bureaucracy that it's can be debilitating for the EU itself domestically with all the reforms that's being needed, but bring that experience and institutionalized democracy into Ukraine even more, into this developing middle power, and capitalize on everything that Ukraine is now producing, because we've seen that as soon as the Middle East war broke out, America was a little bit too proud to come for help, but the Gulf countries did, and Ukraine has brought not just its drone interceptors, but its know-how and expertise into the Middle East, and that's exactly and way more that it can contribute to Europe. So I think it's now increasingly becoming in Europe's interest to engage Ukraine more and to basically, you know, to put it bluntly, get return on investment into Ukraine and secure a very strong European nation on its border and later on as its eastern member. To be on its side. And that moves me into answering your second question about whether Ukraine will be ready to fight. First of all, again, going back to Middle East, Ukraine is fighting its drone warfare now, and it was still available to send about 200 its most experienced drone operators into the Middle East to train, not just to bring interceptors, not just hardware, but to train them up, to teach them how to navigate various terrains, to give them answers on how to fight back what Iranians are producing, because Russian drones are way more advanced compared to the Iranian drones now. So imagine how much of that expertise Europe will need when it has to face Russia. In terms of rapid reaction force, something Commissioner Kubilius mentioned, and whether Ukraine will be ready to get into the maybe new war or be ready to face a new conflict, absolutely yes. And I'm not saying that lightly, having family members there. I can't speak directly for my brother because his wife will probably have a different view, with him having been home in the last 4 years about 5 times and only seen his daughter about 5 times in that period of time. But you have to understand that Ukraine has become such a professionalized, united grassroots effort that all of that expertise will not simply die away. A lot of people who have built out brigades and national corps and built a whole professionalized career, they will want to pass on that knowledge. They will want to come pass on expertise and develop a new military doctrine for at least the eastern flank of NATO, and pass that knowledge on. Not to mention all of its drone technologies. You know, Ukraine is now pioneering not just aerial drones that are in the news, but we're looking at maritime drones that were developed jointly with the UK and Norway. Subsea drones and subsea warfare will be another very interesting and very valuable domain, given all the disruption of critical infrastructure in the Baltic Sea. And that is something that Europe will have to increasingly face as the Arctic melts, and the Arctic theater will be a major one. There will be undoubtedly more space wars in the future, because Russia has figured out that it's much easier to target critical communications and satellites to knock a lot of countries out with one heartbeat. So Ukraine will definitely be there to deliver that knowledge. It can definitely, immediately having spoken to some of contacts in Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, it will be ready to deploy troops to eastern flank of NATO. Of course, not while the war is ongoing in Ukraine, but after ceasefire. I think at least 50,000 of Ukrainian combat experienced troops will be ready to replace some of the American capabilities in the rapid reaction force. So my answer is solidly yes. And I think Ukraine will only expect some support of institutionalizing and professionalizing its army. And that seems just like a very natural step of integrating into the European Defence Union that Commissioner mentioned.
Thank you, Aljona. Ukraine ready to deploy 50,000 troops to the Baltic states. That's almost like a headlines of the news already. Okay, now it's on you. We have a half an hour sharp, and so we have various experts there, and so present yourself, make a question, and also indicate who you want to address. So I have Okay, I will take Peter and then Jonela. Okay, we start with Peter.
Thank you very much. Aliona, in our study, we focused on the integration into European systems, but in your last comment, you mentioned we look beyond because certain theaters are closely connected. And I also remember the debate in the European defense industry that the European market even now is not big enough. So we talk about scaling. To what extent do you see is Ukraine a global player, global provider of security? Thank you.
Yeah, so we take also Jonela.
Yes, Jonela Ciolan, I'm the lead expert on foreign policy, security and defense at the Martin Center. And my question is for Commissioner Kubilius, because we are also working on the European Defense Union, the Martin Center, for the past 3 years. And how do you see the development of the European Defense Union based on this intergovernmental treaty and the political will of the member states to implement it outside of the EU format, because for some of the member states will be seen as another institution that might duplicate NATO, and we know already that the member states, even now in the actual situation, it's very hard to motivate and convince them to implement the current decisions they agree in Brussels when it comes to the defense market or white paper for defense or the defense readiness roadmap, because the national capitals have their own perception and their own views of how to work with the United States.
All right, so let's go to panel. Let's start with the Commissioner, answer that, and then Aliona on Peter's question. So Commissioner, please.
Well, how to convince? By doing convincing job. It's not, perhaps there is no silver bullet to know how you can convince, but definitely it would be very important to spread those debates which we are discussing, especially also related with Ukraine joining this European Defense Union as major factor which can strengthen European defense, especially now when, as we understand, we can very soon start to see a real diminishing of American presence on the European continent. So it's not anymore, theoretical discussion. It's a question how we are building our strengths, in which ways. And I said before, yes, member states still have this, historical legacy in their mindset. Maybe not all of them. But exactly, this question of leadership, which would push, and would give what I call big answers to big questions. In my view, this is now critical. And that leadership, really, in that leadership, Germany plays a special role. So I hope that, I see now, really, German, some kind of shift in different statements, taking some kind of leading role. Chancellor Merz speaking about integration, then Chancellor Merz speaking with Macron on Western Balkans and Moldova, then all that language about 42/7 and so on and so on. So that, and now, all those efforts to bring peace, an idea about, nothing new, 70 billion for defense, but again, it shows, some kind of push, which is very much needed. How much it will go and how it will go, we shall see. I cannot predict. But in my view, what is very important also, maybe just few words about that, is in development of European security architecture, especially together with Ukraine. Europe should not be afraid of Russian or Putin escalation. That is what I saw till now, that always that was some kind of obstacle. That if Europe is supporting Ukraine, if Europe is becoming stronger in defense together with Ukraine, Putin always was using this, as, we shall do something, And even now, It was very interesting statement recently in this, St. Petersburg forum, which had no Zelensky permission, but that was mistake of Putin, of course. I agree with Mark Rutte, but he said that well, he is not against Ukraine becoming member of European Union, but he is very much worried that that European Union is becoming some kind of military organization, and that reminds my own conclusion that why Putin started the war back in 2022. In my view, not because he was afraid that Ukraine can become member of NATO. He was afraid that Ukraine can become member of European Union, and in such a way becoming a very successful country. And for him, that is a danger that Russian people can start to ask some questions why Ukraine is successful, we are not successful, and that can destabilize his regime. For Putin, stability of his regime is the most important goal. So, what we need to, not to be afraid of, now, that since really we see Ukraine is starting to prevail with deep strikes, with liberating some territories near Pokrovsk and so on, that brings nervousness towards Russian side. Putin is becoming more desperate. He's starting to threaten with his statements and so on. We should not be afraid of that. We should go on with our way. We should support Ukraine even more in order for Ukraine to prevail. And we should support Ukraine with its integration into European security structures. That's a must, despite the fact what Putin will try to do. Because at the end, in my view, long term, that can help even Russia to come back to normality, whatever it means.
Thank you. Okay, we have still 20 minutes. So I will give Aliona reply shortly to Peter, then also Klaus to kind of reply, and then we go around. But Aliona first on Peter's.
Thank you, Peter. If you read the conclusion to this paper, it doesn't focus so much on Ukraine's integration into the EU or creation of new security structures as it focuses on European Union reinventing itself. I mentioned before that Ukraine is a rising middle power, and it's being talked about more and more in that sense. The end of the post-Second World War order is gone now. There's geopolitical fragmentation. There's all these multilateral and minilateral formations in current geopolitical thought. And more I hear the European Union being called, especially by the United States, as this declining middle power, that it's no longer the global power that it used to be. And I think that this defense union with Ukraine and leveraging and capitalizing on Ukraine's innovation, on Ukraine becoming globally more important because of its defense innovation, that's how European Union could also change its direction. It's not merely about institutional reform. Again, completely agree with what Commissioner Kubilius said. It's about reinventing the whole structure and creating an opportunity for the Union, A, to defend itself, but B, to play a bigger global role and dictate certain rules. And of course, being able to secure not just its own countries, but the values it stands for. Because in a world where we're seeing the increased rise in power of other malign actors, of dictatorships, it's very important that there's still a global power in this world that stands for the human rights and democracy and everything that Ukraine sees in the European Union. And in terms of just very briefly the countries where Ukraine is playing this global leverage, Japan is highly interested in Asia, in Ukraine, not losing and winning this war, because they understand that Russia is passing on all of its drone technologies and experience to North Korea and China. So they are just watching the way modern warfare transforms and how it will in the future affect Asia. Ukraine is also already co-producing and exchanging vast knowledge on drone deployment with Taiwan. So it's already playing an important role in security in Indo-Pacific. That's why inevitably the United States will come back to Ukraine, and that's why all the private sector companies are not leaving Ukraine despite the government moving slightly away. But that's even now until midterm elections, so we won't see how it plays further. Canada is already heavily invested into Ukraine. Other countries that are not EU members, Middle East is now relying on Ukraine. We don't know which developments will come in Africa because Ukraine's contingent is heavily present there fighting back the Wagner group in Africa. So Ukraine is already playing a very important global role, and that's why I think with the EU partnering and capitalizing on all that experience, reach and influence will enhance the European Union itself.
Thank you, Alena. Klaus?
Yeah, I mean, the Commissioner has encouraged us to be optimistic and self-confident. And I think there's reason to be, because if we look at it, if geopolitics is about the transformation of space, I think the European Union has been the most successful geopolitical actor for several decades, from the 6 to the 27. And also after the fall of the Iron Curtain, we've been able to enlarge the space of freedom and stability and security and prosperity 1,000 kilometers to the east. And with Ukraine, we could enlarge it 2,000 kilometers to the east. And as the Commissioner has said, this is maybe also the best hope for Russia for a post-colonial future. You know, in the 20th century, the colonial states have given up their colonies. The tragedy of Russia is that it has its colonies in its immediate neighborhood, which makes it much more difficult. So if Russia one day wants to be democratic, free, and treat its citizens as they want to be treated, I think a free and prosperous Ukraine can do them a major favor.
Thank you, Klaus. Okay, so we have now 15 minutes and 8 interventions of how I played it. Each I give floor, but 1 minute. If it goes over time, we'll cut. Then I give to the panel, to Klaus, Aliona, and last for Commissioner who has to leave sharp in time. So keep it in 1 minute. So there back, present yourself and one idea or question, and I will go. But
yeah, Rainer Winning, Reserve Officer with 3 deployments in the Battle Group Lithuania, EU Training Mission Ukraine, and in the NATO mission for Ukraine and Wiesbaden. I'm very pessimistic. I would like to ask you to comment on 3 aspects. One is speed. Our procurement procedures in the member states are far too slow against the high speed of procurement in Ukraine. Time, we don't have time. 5 days ago, the Chief of Defense of Latvia said that maybe they will attack us by 2028. And the third one is human resources. We don't have enough soldiers. Just one example, Germany wants to procure 600 anti-aircraft platforms, Skyranger, so the crew has 3. Then from Ukraine, we know we need a second crew, and if possible, a third crew. So we speak alone for this weapon system about 4,500 soldiers without logistics and everything. We don't have the people, and that
so I think
we can't fight.
All right, thank you. Then we take Zsuzsa, then Zsuzsa there, and then Galina.
Thank you. Zsuzsa Ferenci from the Academic Council. I have a question to Klaus. You mentioned that Ukraine must not reduce its capacities, and this is to help also Europe to fill the gap in its own transition process. And you also added to that we must give to Ukraine, not just expect from Ukraine in this regard. Now, if we look at the future, once the war is over and the reconstruction of Ukraine starts, do you see a challenge in reconciling that expectation for Ukraine to remain what it is for Europe and its defense with the challenge of a country that is reconstructing itself after the war? Do you see this, and how can this be reconciled for Europe as much as for Ukraine?
Okay, good. Still 3 interventions. So Galina, short comment or question?
Hello, good morning. My name is Galina Fomenchenko. I'm Senior Political Advisor of the EPP. So my question is the following. Personally, I like very much the idea of integration Ukraine in European security architecture and Mr. Veli's idea of Ukraine having as a first pillar of defense. But I have a lot of concerns about disproportion in enlargement debate. So on the one hand, we see a lot of enthusiasm of integration of defense sector of Ukraine and a lot of hesitation in enlargement. So with knowing the mood of some member states, upcoming elections in France and so on, how we can be sure that this disbalance in speed of integration of Ukrainian defense and delay in enlargement integration of Ukraine, how we can be sure that this balance is not kept, because I think it can be very dangerous for the future development of Ukraine.
Yeah, maybe Merz was trying to make a proposal on that. Okay, there, keep it very short, because otherwise, okay.
Kurt Geisert, I'm one of the guides in the House of European History. Question for Mr. Commissioner. You spoke about shifting into European instead of national defense. How many years will this take, in your eyes, to be relevant? Thank you.
Okay. Then yes. Then. No. Okay.
Many thanks, Sami. Ivan Delibosic. I used to work for the Martens Center and President Martens himself. I'm with Hydrogen Europe now, where I lead the Resilience and Defense Task Force, and I advise the European Defense Agency. So my question is related to one aspect of the structure, and that is the infrastructure, and notably the energy, because I'm sure that President Kubilius is painfully aware of the limits that we have when it comes to fuels, and also this is an opportunity for Ukraine to contribute. Simply, the question is, what are we doing to stimulate the production of synthetic fuels that are only homegrown fuels that can support the defense sector? And can we use that also to engage in rebuilding and economic growth in Ukraine as a critical energy hub for military applications? Thank you.
Okay, and then there was one there, and Christian, then we have to take it to panel so that we have managed to finish in time. So there was one. Just keep it shortish, please.
Hi. Brian Chesler. While I think Ukrainian integration into the European security infrastructure is vital to everyone's interest, I'm wondering if this will be another exercise of Europe pushing its responsibility to defend itself, again, onto others, outside forces, as has been done with the United States. What are we doing to stop that from happening? What are we doing to stop Europe from just saying, Ukraine, now you're responsible for all of our defense?
Okay, good. And Christian is the last one, and then I take last back to panel.
No, thank you, Tommy. Christian Fronsner, Hans Seidel Foundation. So NATO has a defense spending 5%. And it says additional money is all for NATO, not for EU. So how do you coordinate European defense with NATO transatlantic defense?
Thank you. Good. Okay, thank you very much for questions. Unfortunately, panel doesn't have time to reply to all of them, so I propose that Klaus and Leona to try to take off the questions one or two, and in 2 or 3 minutes come back, and then I give floor to Commissioner. Klaus?
Okay, maybe to start with the last question, push responsibility onto another. The starting point is we don't regard Ukraine as another. We don't regard it as an outside factor. We regard it as a future partner of our family. And also for the United States could also play its global role because of NATO, because of 31 bases in Europe. It couldn't conduct the Iran operation without refueling in Bulgaria and in other countries. It has always been in mutual interest. It was not an exploitation of the United States, has been a mutual benefit. And we have to construct the Ukraine relationship exactly the same. But what is important is, the moment there's a ceasefire, European governments will have more difficulties to communicate to populations, why are we supporting? Why do we give money? Why have we got to support also the reconstruction? So we have to show we get something in return. And where Ukraine easily can give in return is in the area of security and defense, and that's why the Commission has said the first part should be the integration into the future European Defence Union of the European Union. because we need to have a balanced relationship for Ukraine, but also for us. And Rainer Welling is absolutely right. It's all about scale and speed. And if we are serious about scale and speed, we should ask Ukrainians to reorganize our own military effort, because they have shown that they can do it.
Thank you, Klaus. Aliona.
I couldn't agree more with that. And Brian, if you read the paper, you actually see the two sides to each area that I describe of where Ukraine can contribute to the EU, in which capacity, and how the EU, of course, can return its experience, not just funding, but institutionalize some of the processes in Ukraine, bring in professionalism, bring in centuries of experience of running liberal democracies, because we have to remember that while mentally Ukrainians have always been Europeans, but institutionally we always lacked, because we've only been out of totalitarian regime for 30 years. Or so. So it's a very mutual process. Ukraine will be happy to share its knowledge and innovation and experience, as Klaus rightly mentioned. The defense industry is now being valued at 55 billion. Last summer, when I spoke about this at a closed event with President Zelensky, it was only 35. So imagine it's expanded by 20 billion in only 6 months or so. Only 8 billion is being capitalized, so there's a huge potential for growth. And similarly, we talk about Russia being on a war footing. Ukraine is also on the same defensive war footing, and it will not be that easy to even stall that process. So opening it up and incorporating into the brand new European industry space, I think will be essential and beneficial not just to the EU, but also to Ukraine. In terms of NATO capabilities, I did speak to someone highly experienced in this who was very reassuring in saying that there are mechanisms already being looked at national armies, under which jurisdiction they are, and then defense capabilities, which are increasingly getting funded by national governments. I'm sure Commissioner Kubilius will have more to say on that front. But we also have to remember that European Defence Union in its own right is strengthening the European leg of NATO. We're not talking about dismantling NATO. There are some problems now with finding the common language with the American administration, but as in all of our states, governments change, policies can change as well. Europe will, of course, have to become more autonomous and not solely rely on one actor. But we still have to maintain the transatlantic alliance because, as I keep saying, democracy and liberalism is extremely important in today's very volatile world. And just finally, I'm not a big expert on energy. All I can say is Ukraine is innovating, and before the invasion of 2022, it has already started talking to the EU about the production of its blue and green hydrogen. There's vast gas storages that Ukraine possesses that can be deployed into European system. Ukraine is already integrated into the EU electricity grid. So there is quite a big potential for energy, not to mention critical minerals that the US is very hungry about. So I think there could definitely be a very beneficial cooperation on that front too.
Thank you, Aliona. And Mr. Kubilius?
Yeah. Well,
starting
from this question about speed, time, and people, I agree very much, and again, we see the legacy problem in Europe, which will demand some effort from our side to change, and exactly Ukrainian experience very much needed. Because if you will look into publicly available statistical numbers, in some big countries of Europe, which has big industry, defense industry, national governments are procuring around of 70 or 80% of what the industries are producing. There is no single market, and 80% of contracts are done as a direct, award without any public tender, because treaties are allowing this exception. So that is what really creates the whole environment lacking competition, dynamism, and things like that. And even, no space for startups, SMEs, and things like that. I'm always repeating that Ukrainian army is the best army, not only because they have the best soldiers, but also because they have the best dynamic industry. And the question even for me what came first. When I'm listening to, I am not, when I'm listening to the history, how, for example, Drone Army was created by Mikhailo Fedorov and some others, by a cluster of those, dynamic startups, I understand how much they influence also demand, and luckily they had generals at that time, from the very beginning, who understood that technological changes, they are forcing totally different demand. In Europe, still, that is not the case. Demand is very much influenced, what our militaries are buying is very much influenced by our traditional big industry, and that is our problem. So that's why, speed time and so on, this is, what needs to be changed very much. Again, learning a lot from Ukraine. Now, defense and integration. I mean integration into defense and full integration. I do not see here, such kind of big difference that we shall integrate Ukraine into defense, and then, Europe will forget about full integration. I see exactly synergy which will start to come through defense integration. Will have very positive influence in general, on integration, full integration into EU. Starting from this perception, how vital is to have for us, for our defense, Ukraine inside of our family, and second, through defense industry integration. Defense industry from the West will start to require the same rules, European rules in Ukraine as they have back in Europe. So I see exactly this movement not as continuation of some kind of integration process. Now, question on, I was saying about the transatlantic collective defense is changing into European. You asked about, that national defense is changing into European. Yeah, that's also in some way is part of the same process. How long it will take? Well, I cannot guess, but let's remember the very beginning of European community. That in parallel, European economical community was started to be created by Jean Monnet, by Schuman, by Adenauer and others. There was very strong attempt to create European defense community. And it was not far away from materializing. If France would not decide, to change their opinion, we should have this European defense community, which we are trying to create now. So looking from, how it can go quite rapidly, especially if political leaders will start to listen and to hear what their people are speaking. The last opinion polls were showing that European people are preferring European defense. 70% of them are supporting, European defense instead of national defense, and even instead of NATO. And those data are coming from really important countries like Germany, like Spain, like Belgium. So the point is that the leaders should start to listen, and then we shall go. Now, again, I agree with Klaus on this, will we not say that the United States was responsible for our defense and now Ukraine should be responsible, and we shall have this enjoying, now it will be Ukrainian dividend. It was before that it was peace dividend, now we shall enjoy Ukrainian. No, I don't see so. Really, Ukraine can have major influence on how things will change also inside of Europe in terms of defense, and I do not see such a problem. And on money, NATO and EU, well, I do not see here big difference. I mean, we need to remember that in the European continent, we have 23 European Union members who are also members of NATO. So, and we are spending the same 3.5%, whatever you can call for NATO or for EU, I don't know, for member states to become stronger. Stronger with defense capability, stronger with defense industry, and that makes both EU stronger and NATO stronger. So that's, synergy in between of us very, very, very clear.
Thank you, Commissioner. So time is up. Maybe just to conclude, first of all, thank you, Commissioner, because we are here because of you. It was your comment when you said that listen, we have this issue, we should reflect on that, so we reacted. And so it was appropriate that you were. Thank you so much. And maybe the conclusion is something what Aljona said, that you could say in the way the war has two parts, the ongoing war, but there is also after-war issue which we need to reflect on more, the societal integration, all these veterans who are going to become back. Some of them maybe continue as a career, but some of them need to integrate back to the society. And in that process, Ukrainian healing, we need to be involved with that. But with that, thank you, Commissioner, panelists, and you coming here. Thank you for active questions. And with that, I would like to invite you for lunch to continue the discussion. Thank you so much for coming.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.